After my first year of teaching 9th grade English in the Bay Area, I nearly dropped out of high school. 23 years old, and I had become cynical. My youthful ideals and radical notions of how I could play a role in school reform were shattered in as few as 180 days. I had concealed in the top drawer of my desk a letter of resignation that I intended to deliver to my principal. It explained that while I was very passionate about the work that I was doing with my high school English students, I could no longer participate in a system so fraught with failure. Student learning thwarted by truancy and paralyzed by state tests my students didn't take seriously. Remedial classes loaded with mostly students of color and boys, and a palpable apathy among staff. And then I found AVID, or rather, AVID found me. After relocating to San Diego, I interviewed for a teaching position at El Cajon Valley High School. However, the school could only offer me a part-time contract teaching English. What? I have to put my husband through medical school. I need a full-time job, I said to the woman who interviewed me. And then I began to wonder if my teaching credential might get me hired as a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld. No, seriously. And then the phone rang. "We found you a full-time position," the woman announced. "You will need to teach a class called AVID and attend a conference this summer in San Diego. Will you accept these terms?" Well, I must have stopped listening after I heard full-time position, because somehow I missed the part about giving up a whole week of my beloved summer vacation. I was still reticent about taking another position in a large, comprehensive public high school. But I realized that I needed to be gainfully employed before my husband started school. "I accept," I told her. That decision to stay in public education and give teaching one more try was one of the best decisions that I have ever made. Now, more than a decade later, I am energized and even more hopeful for our students and for our future. Don't misunderstand, I am still frustrated by the ineffectiveness of the system, still dismayed at the sluggish growth of school reform, and still appalled by the achievement gaps. However, as an AVID teacher, coordinator, and more recently as an AVID consultant, I have been working on the front lines, witnessing inspiring stories of AVID student triumph and success. And I know that when committed teachers believe that every student has the potential to go to college, the future looks very promising. When schools decide to embrace a model of acceleration for every student and hold every child to the same high standards, the future looks very promising. When a school's principal inspires teachers to examine closely issues around equity and access, and to confront institutional racism as a facet of the school's culture, a changed future looks very promising. At the end of my first year of teaching, probably like some of you, I was frustrated by a system that I didn't know how to fix. However, during my first AVID Summer Institute, a pair of wacky and inspiring staff developers named Sandy and Willie tried to convince me that this AVID class and AVID strategies would transform the experiences of the students in my classroom. They armed me with ideas and plans to promote equal access to rigorous curriculum for all students. I longed to become the kind of teachers Sandy and Willie were, and I was in awe of their energy and enthusiasm for this program called AVID. This may sound corny, but I really did leave the Institute empowered, renewed, and rejuvenated as a teacher, and most of all, excited to meet my first AVID class. You may think I'm crazy, but after giving up 5 days of my summer, I would have given up another 5. I was that excited. In order to understand my personal mission in life, there is something you should know about my core beliefs. I believe that as an educator, I am a public servant, and inherent in that role, it is my civic responsibility to provide a high-quality, intensive educational experience for every student. I am charged with the task of ensuring that each student graduates from high school with opportunity and choice. Underlying this belief is a core value that I hold close from my spiritual life, and that is my belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. If every child who entered our school was treated with dignity and respect, and if every teacher approached every child as an academic scholar on the road to college, I believe school would be a very different experience for our students. If we stopped segregating students based on what they can't do, and instead provided them with an opportunity of an unwavering vision of what they can do, I believe school would be a place where all students would want to be. If we provided more support for students in the academic middle, those who have not yet realized their full potential, and we gave them more because they need more, I believe school would be a place that delivered our nation's promise: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, we must confront some harsh realities about the state of our educational system today. It is underfunded, undervalued, criticized heavily, and as these numbers show, unfortunately unequal. The achievement gap that separates youth due to socioeconomic differences is startling. I believe education is the antidote to income disparity, and we can only make headway if our most impoverished children receive top-quality educations and are encouraged by their teachers to go to college. As educators, we are unfortunately accustomed to hearing bad news: low test scores, schools failing to make AYP, school funding cuts. This week, however, you will hear good news. AVID's almost 30-year history is an uplifting story about preparing students in the middle, and most especially students from low-income backgrounds, English language learners, and students of color, to enter college with astonishing success. It is a story about ensuring that we live in the kind of world that offers every child an opportunity for post-secondary education when they graduate from high school, and a story that has changed individuals, whole families, and entire communities. It is a story about the kind of world that I want to live in. My life's work in AVID so far has been built on a foundation of social justice. I find meaning and value in my work because I believe I am working to remedy what our educational system has failed to do. I am committed to this work because of the former students in my life, whose success stories demonstrate how they truly live up to AVID's mission by becoming responsible adults in our democratic society. Ernesto Lopez and Rochelle Boyd are two students from underserved backgrounds who defied the odds in true AVID fashion. Each one has a story that delivers a message of hope and inspiration. My students are responsible for keeping me in the teaching profession, and I could not be more proud to have been their AVID teacher. Rochelle Boyd describes herself as the exception to what should have been. An African American, she was raised largely by her mother in a fragile community where college was neither the goal nor the expectation. But Rochelle, quote, wasn't comfortable with being a statistic, end quote. She wanted to be the exception. A natural leader in her AVID class, Rochelle flourished academically and socially. After 6 years of AVID, she graduated in the top 4% of her graduating class and was accepted by several of our state's top universities, including UC Berkeley. When she brought me in her acceptance letter to post on our classroom's wall of fame, I was overcome with emotion, crying, cheering, hugging, whooping, and hollering. Rochelle looked at me with a straight face and said, "Well, I wasn't that excited about this, but I'm catching your enthusiasm." You see, from the time that she was 6 through high school, Rochelle's father had been in and out of trouble and had only recently returned home from many years of incarceration. He didn't want her to leave San Diego to go to college. She wasn't excited about this acceptance letter because the reality of going to Berkeley wasn't yet for her a reality. It was merely a letter. In that moment, I promised her she would most certainly go to Berkeley, even if I had to drive her up there myself. So I visited Rochelle's house to talk to her parents about this wonderful opportunity. 2 hours later, with Rochelle sitting next to me on the couch, her hand clutched in mine, and tears too numerous to sop up with one box of tissue. We had convinced her father to let his baby go away to college. But in fact, it wasn't until Rochelle graduated from Berkeley that he finally understood that his own daughter ranked among the very finest students in this country, and that he nearly let that opportunity pass her by. Today, Rochelle is a Head Start teacher in Los Angeles for the Teach for America program, giving back to students from communities much like her own. She will complete her service to our country this next year. It's okay, you can clap at that one. Interrupt me. Currently, Rochelle is applying to graduate school to obtain her degree in nursing and women's health and midwifery. I know that her kind spirit, warm heart, talkative, and enthusiastic nature will serve her well on the labor wards. I asked her recently about how her graduate school application process compared to her undergraduate application process. She replied, "Thank God for AVID." Rochelle embodies the ID in AVID. She demonstrated amazing individual determination to earn top grades in AP classes. And while she was very hard on herself, a self-described perfectionist, AVID was a safe place for her to express her ideas, to let down her guard, and to be herself. AVID raised the expectations that she had already set for herself, and over time, she began to expect of herself what we expected of her. She did everything on her own, but without AVID, she's very sure she would not have known what to do. Rochelle has shattered national statistics and defined for herself a future of choice and opportunity. It is my honor to introduce Rochelle Boyd. Ernesto Lopez sat quietly in my 9th grade English class. A hard worker, but hesitant to participate orally. As an English language learner only recently mainstreamed, Ernesto's command of the English language, especially in written expression, was muddled by errors typical of an English student. However, the way in which Ernesto used language to convey emotion stirred me to seek him out individually. When I asked Ernesto about his writing process, he admitted that he often wrote his essays in Spanish and then translated to English. That would explain the beautiful and emotive use of figurative language that marked Ernesto's unique style. We spoke about his goals for the future, and when he told me that one day he would like to be a journalist, a writer, I knew that the AVID program, with its emphasis on reading and writing, was the right place for this student. Ernesto met all the criteria for being an AVID student. He would be the first in his family to seek higher education, and as a Hispanic male, he represented a demographic underserved in our nation's colleges. Recently emigrated from Mexico, Ernesto had only been learning English for 5 years, yet he had moved swiftly through his ELL classes. His mother and father worked at night with a cleaning service, and Ernesto often assisted them so that they could return home before dawn. He held other jobs throughout high school to support his own financial needs. And he struggled in school, not because of his developing language or because he didn't have the cognitive ability to succeed in high-level classes. Ernesto struggled with self-esteem. When he perceived something as too challenging, he doubted that he would be able to graduate and go to college. No one else in his family had, so how could he? School, he knew, would allow him to strive for something more. He needed someone to believe in him. He needed a community of peers who had the same goals and dreams that he did. He needed a mentor who would coach him, pick him up when he was feeling down, and push him to achieve more than he ever thought possible. Ernesto joined my AVID class during the second semester of his freshman year, and for the next 2 years, he worked very hard to earn solid grades in college preparatory classes. Yet the unsustainable demands of school, work, and family obligation led predictably to self-doubt. Ernesto came to me regularly, almost monthly, about wanting to drop out of AVID. We talked and set goals and refocused his energies on what he could accomplish. And despite those monthly requests, I wouldn't let him drop AVID. I conspired with his counselor and made his attempt to quit AVID so difficult and frustrating that he was forced to stay in because, quite honestly, that was easier. There were times when Ernesto's binder was a mess. And those were the times that I knew his life was in disarray and that he needed my support just to figure things out. There were times I knew he needed to feel some success so that he would be reminded of all that he had accomplished so far. And there were times he just didn't believe that he would ever make it to college. And those were the times that we sat down to work on his application and to write his story. His story was so compelling that I knew admissions could not ignore it. By his senior year, Ernesto had stopped trying to drop out of AVID. My conspiracy had worked. He acquiesced and did everything in his power to get into college. He researched scholarships, he stretched himself from ELL routes all the way to AP English, and he applied to private schools that would embrace his diversity and honor his religious beliefs. 4 years after he completed high school, the first in his family to do so, he graduated from Point Loma Nazarene College, a journalism major, with a dream of working for the Spanish-English newspaper here in San Diego, which he did. It gets better. This fall, Ernesto will attend graduate school to earn a master's degree in social work, and he hopes to be a high school counselor. He is perfectly suited for this profession, and he will be such an advocate for his students, especially those who face similar struggles as his. And by the way, Ernesto is here, and he has his resume with him. He's looking for a job, and I'll be his resume. I'll be his reference. Ernesto did all the hard work, but when he didn't have it in him to believe it was possible, I believed for him. Ernesto's story is the story of so many of our AVID students, stories that began with founder Mary Catherine Swanson's first AVID class continue in all of our AVID classes today. It is my honor to introduce Ernesto Lopez. Most AVID Summer Institute participants I talked to at the conclusion of this week unabashedly admit that after Summer Institute, they are inspired, renewed, rejuvenated, and empowered to get back to their schools to implement or refine their AVID program. If you are new to AVID or returning for another institute, I hope your experience is the same as mine. I was inspired to believe that students can overcome hardship, obstacles, socioeconomic barriers, and an inequitable school system in order to realize their college dreams. I was changed by the moral obligation I felt to challenge what is accepted as status quo. I committed to raise my expectations, champion students in the middle, and advocate for equal access to rigorous curriculum. I came to believe that more students could graduate, that more would apply and be accepted to college, and that more would earn a bachelor's degree. I was empowered to advocate for expanded AP course offerings that would be available to my students, and trusted that the teachers of those classes would welcome a more diverse population of students. As an AVID teacher, I had to believe that an English language learner could challenge and pass an AP literature course. I had to believe that a mother raising 2 girls on her own in a low-income community would send her youngest daughter to one of the finest academic institutions in this country. I believed that poverty, low expectations, ineffective systems, and inequitable opportunities would not prevent my students from achieving their college dreams. I had to believe these things to stay the course. I had to believe in my students until they learned to believe in themselves. I believed through 2 school shootings in our district. I believed despite misgivings expressed by my colleagues. I believed when my students were suspended, taken to jail, and abused. I believed when a brother and sister had no other option but to live in a car with their drug-dealing parents. I believed when my students dropped out, got pregnant, cried in my arms, or had lost all hope. I had to believe because sometimes they did not and someone had to. Together, my AVID students and I faced unbelievable, but certainly not insurmountable challenges. Teaching AVID was never easy, but it was worth every moment, and by far the best days of my teaching career were in the AVID classroom. I hope this week gives you the courage to be the kind of educator that our world needs for our students and for our future. Thank you, and have a great week.